I'm Matt McClure, and this is Currents.
Governor Paterson is in Brooklyn to talk budget, and the church has a lot at stake.
We borrowed in deficit without any understanding of how to pay the money back.
Local students meet some real-life angels.
All children should have the opportunity to get a good education, and you can't do better than the Catholic school system for that.
And a new effort to help victims of domestic violence.
The lives of children, the lives of men and women need to be supported to break the cycle of violence.
Well, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Francesca Maxime has the night off. Well, embattled New York Governor David Paterson says he plans to, quote, fulfill the mission in which God has placed me. That amid a growing chorus of calls for him to step down over allegations of corruption. Paterson made his comments yesterday at a church service in Brooklyn, and he had even more to say this morning at Brooklyn's Borough Hall. I was there as the governor fielded questions about the state budget from the public and from the media.
Governor David Paterson heard words of encouragement.
You know, David, I'm a very strong supporter of yours.
And scrutiny.
You can only cut to the bone, and then you hit bone. I think we're approaching it.
As he held a town hall meeting in Brooklyn to talk about the state's budget woes. New York State faces a budget shortfall of more than $9 billion, and the governor said the state could run out of money by May or June if serious cuts are not made.
We're going to have to cut health care another $1 billion, education a 5% reduction at $1.1 billion, and another $1 billion from our agencies. We are going to make cuts that if you told me years ago that I was going to be governor and I'd be making those kind of cuts, I probably wouldn't have believed either. But the reality is there are pieces of legislation I introduced that I've had to veto because we don't have the money.
Many of the people who attended the town hall were supportive of Governor Paterson, but the idea of spending cuts did not sit well with others, especially cuts to services for those who are less fortunate.
I'm asking you, sir, as a governor, to have a personal private investigator to oversee the homelessness. This is a violation of human rights, and I should have the right to stay in my home, to live peacefully in my own apartment, which I paid for.
One item on the chopping block in the governor's budget, funding for the Maternity and Early Childhood Foundation. The New York State Catholic Conference says the foundation provides crucial services for young pregnant women and low-income mothers. They've called on Paterson to restore funding for the program, but he did not address the issue today. The governor was asked about the controversial Atlantic Yards project, which we covered last week here on Currents.
Why is your administration playing along with the use of a money-losing mega monopoly land grab? One developer, 30 acres, the kind of eminent domain abuse that you previously opposed.
10 years from now, either they will be right or you will be right. And what I didn't want to do was to impose my own judgment where there has already been a court decision on the issue.
Governor Paterson did come here today to Brooklyn Borough Hall to talk about the budget with citizens, but that wasn't the only thing on his mind, and Governor Paterson did not shy away from questions about the current political climate in Albany.
Recently, I've been the target of rumors and innuendo, but it hasn't stopped me. Recently, I've been also the target of special interest commercials, $8 million of them, but it hasn't stopped me. And I've also been the target of a lawsuit when I took an action to prevent the state from running out of money last December, but that hasn't stopped me.
Critics have been calling for Paterson's resignation because of allegations his administration interfered in a domestic violence case against a top aide, and questions about how he got free World Series tickets last year. The governor stepped outside to meet with reporters and answered questions about those allegations.
Most investigations do not like for witnesses to discuss the facts of the case. I want the committee to come back with a finding of no fault on my part. The Attorney General's taken the case, and we're extending him his full cooperation.
In spite of the controversy, the governor says he will continue to lead.
This is a difficult period. It's going to be enormously difficult. But if we can get through it, the horizon is better for New York than a lot of other states. It's been my pleasure to serve you as governor. Thank you so much for being here today.
Now, in the meantime, Catholics will be paying close attention to what happens tomorrow on the governor's home turf, the state capitol. Tuesday is the New York State Catholic Conference Public Policy Day in Albany. Bishops and lay leaders from around the state are traveling to the Capitol to talk to government leaders and representatives about public policy issues. I've actually written more about that on our blog. You can just head over to currentsny.net and click on Riding the Wave. And we'll also have more about Public Policy Day coming up later on in the week, right here on Currents. But in the meantime, stay tuned. There's more of today's edition of Currents coming up straight ahead. When we come back, we'll have the day's headlines, including an early St. Patrick's Day in Queens. Welcome back to Currents. I'm Matt McClure. Coming up in just a bit, 3 men are heroes to the end in Chile. We'll show you why. But first, let's have a look at the day's headlines. Pope Benedict's brother says he's willing to testify in an abuse case involving a German boys' choir that he was once in charge of. Monsignor George Ratzinger says he knows nothing about the alleged abuse, which is said to have occurred in the early 1960s. That is before he led the choir. Well, in a case closer to Pope Benedict's current home, a member of a choir that regularly sings at the Vatican has been fired after his alleged involvement in a gay prostitution ring. During a separate investigation, the man is heard in a taped phone conversation arranging sexual encounters for an Italian businessman who worked for the Vatican. In some cases, the encounters involved seminarians. The businessman has also been let go from his post. Meanwhile, the Vatican is expressing sadness and concern over religious violence in Nigeria. Reports say more than 500 people were killed in Christian villages there over the weekend. Most of the victims were women and children. Well, today is International Women's Day, and in Manhattan, a press conference marked the start of a new effort to help Mexican nationals who are survivors of domestic abuse and prevent that abuse from occurring.
So the idea here was for the Mexican Council General to bring together some very important resources for Mexican women here in New York City that are victims of domestic violence. They've received some support through the Women's Foundation and are working with a community-based organization called Violence Intervention Program, and along with the City of New York, in trying to address the issue of domestic violence within the Mexican community. But there are so many other resources for women here in New York City that they can avail themselves to. All they have to do is call 311. We have people who can speak their language, and we can direct them to very specific resources.
Because the church is really present in the life of the Mexican immigrant community, we so appeal to the church to seek a collaborative partnership with us on that.
Well, domestic violence is any act by the spouse or by the parents that put in harm's way or hurts the rights or the physical situation of a children or a spouse.
And it sends a message that the lives of children, the lives of men and women need to be supported to break the cycle of violence. The Catholic Church have a really present role, a very important role, both in reaching out to the victims of violence as well as to the perpetrators, and accordingly providing support.
Oftentimes, someone who's a victim of domestic violence, before they even call the police or seek help, will seek help from the clergy and from people in the church. So it's important that the church obviously know where they can refer them, let them know where they can help, and encourage them to get that help, because no one should suffer in silence and no one should be a victim of domestic violence.
And you can call the Mexican consulate for more information. And here in Brooklyn, families who want to send their children to Catholic school but can't afford it have a place to turn. Through the Be an Angel to a Student program, sponsors, known as Angels, pay for a part of a Catholic school student's tuition. It's part of the Brooklyn Diocese Futures in Education Foundation. And recently, the students had an opportunity to thank their angels.
You know, a lot of times we forget to say thank you to people that do things for us, and we take people and things for granted, and we must never do that. And tonight, all of the children and the families are here to say thank you to all of the angels that keep this program alive.
It's a really nice program where everyone gets a chance to actually receive love in return for giving.
The Angels program pairs students, needy students in the Diocese of Brooklyn and Queens with angels who pay about $1,500 a year in tuition. It's really extraordinary how many people have come here today. It's such an outpouring, and just the feeling in the room is truly, truly special. But it all goes right back to the founder of the program, John Loconsolo, who's just an extraordinarily generous individual who has been an angel to countless children through the years.
God's been pretty good to me, and I think that all children should have the opportunity to get a good education. And you can't do better than the Catholic school system for that. For people like myself, it gives me the great opportunity to meet all these beautiful youngsters who are going to achieve a lot because of the education they're getting.
There have been some angels who have come to us recently who have requested specifically to help Haitian refugees from the earthquake who have come here.
The answer came that an angel was able to sponsor our daughter Angie for almost all of the tuition for the remainder of the school year.
Tonight, when Andre was speaking about his daughter and how she received an angel gift, and during the night when he was telling his story of how him and his family survived the earthquake and how the school where his daughter went and was destroyed and how they were airlifted to the United States, it was very moving, and someone that was here tonight decided to pay the rest of the tuition for his daughter.
My goal is to one day be an angel just like many of you, so I too can be a source of comfort to others like you all have been to me.
And St. Patrick's Day came early in Queens this past weekend with a parade in Belle Harbor. The day kicked off with a mass at St. Francis de Sales Parish, and then marchers made their way through Belle Harbor, Rockaway Park, and Rockaway Beach. It is the city's second largest St. Patrick's Day parade after, of course, the parade down Fifth Avenue in Manhattan, which takes place on St. Patrick's Day. You can read more about the Queens Parade in the upcoming issue of The Tablet. Well, stay tuned. There's much more currents coming up.
Just ahead, after I do, what if they don't? What's being done to keep marriages alive?
Welcome back. You know, it's no secret that divorce is up and marriage is down. Fewer people are even choosing to get married in the first place. But as we hear from Rome Reports, the Vatican is now trying to reverse that trend.
According to a study by the Institute for American Values, in 1970, about 79% of couples were married. But in 2008, only 57% of couples exchanged vows. Meanwhile, other studies point out that about 49% of marriages in the U.S. end in divorce. In countries like Switzerland, the percentage is around 64%. In France, 43%, and about 12% in Italy.
La situazione è molto diversificata.
The state of marriages are different in every part of the world. That's why preparing for marriage can't be the same for India, the Philippines, Korea, Mexico, Africa, Europe, the U.S., or South Africa. In each one of these countries, the situation is different, and the issues they face are also different.
To help couples get married and stay together, the Vatican is writing a guide to prepare couples get married and remain true to their love.
The manual was one of Pope Benedict XVI's goals. Its intent is to serve churches with a document that responds to today's challenges that come from preparing youth for the sacrament of matrimony.
The state of marriages is different according to the continent. That's why the Pontifical Council for Families is conducting an investigation with the collaboration of experts in psychology, law, and sociology to learn about the real situation of the family structure around the globe.
There are common denominators among the different geographical regions, but they're adjusted slightly to cater to the area while still allowing the Church to send its message to those who are on the path to receive the sacrament of matrimony.
The manual is in its first preparation phase, but the Vatican anticipates it will address key issues that couples will be able to take into consideration before they say "I do." which can change their lives forever. Traditionally, the church provides guidance in order to help marriages last. Both husband and wife must have a clear doctrine on contraception, education of children, and religious practice.
Ci sono dei problemi che sono comuni a
A manual should be able to answer the key question that all couples face. But above all, I believe the main objective is to raise our voices, to speak of human hope, of theology, of a love that can last forever.
What's necessary to know before one gets married? Who can get married? And what does being married mean? Those are the questions the manual will answer, but couples will also be asked to continue receiving formation during the first couple of years of their marriage to help them plant the seed of their happiness.
Estar casados no significa...
Being married means being part of an intimate communion for life, to love with the desire to forge an indissoluble communion open to life and the education of children. This will definitely be addressed in one way or another.
The manual, which is expected to come to light in 2012, will help couples not only say "I do" at the altar, but mean "I do" for life.
Well, one initiative that is already in place and designed to help strengthen marriages is the Worldwide Marriage Encounter. We've profiled this organization here on Currents in the past, and you can find out more by heading on over to our website, currentsny.net. And for more details there, just click on our blog. It's called Riding the Wave, and search for Marriage Encounter. In the meantime, though, stay with us. There's much more Currents coming up straight ahead.
When we return, amid death and destruction in Chile, the story of 3 men who made the ultimate sacrifice to save others.
Finally tonight in Chile, recovery efforts continue after last month's massive magnitude 8.8 earthquake. Hundreds were killed. Some 500,000 homes have been declared uninhabitable. Many people fearing aftershocks are now living outdoors. In the middle of all this nightmare around them, though, heroes are emerging, and their stories are finally being told, including this one of a fisherman, his son, and a friend who all made the ultimate sacrifice to help others. CNN's Carl Penhall has more.
Mass for the survivors to honor their dead. Open air because Constitucion's church is so badly damaged. There's a roll call for the few crushed by the quake and for the many drowned by the tsunami. Fisherman Pedro Muñoz, stepson Luis Anabalon, and friend Juan Padilla could have survived. Instead, they chose to sacrifice themselves to rescue others. They'd been camping on this island with scores of others. As the tsunami rolled in, the 3 men raced to evacuate as many as they could. Tabita Bravo is now Pedro's widow. Pedro and my son shouted women and children first. I ran to get everybody together, but the boat was too small and there wasn't enough space for everybody, she said. She refused a place on the first boat. Tabita's husband came back for her and 9 more just before a second wave hit. Her son Luis and family friend Juan stayed behind to organize others still stranded. As I looked back, I heard screams and laments. I shouted to my son Luis to run to the trees and climb up. He shouted back, "I'm okay, Mum. Never forget. I love you. I love you," she said. By the time the boat reached shore a second time, witnesses say Pedro had ferried at least 20 people to safety. Tabita begged him not to go back, but a neighbor begged him to make a third and final trip. He said don't worry, he'd be back, but he said if he didn't make it, then that was God's will. He said if he didn't try to rescue more people, then he'd always have that on his conscience. Those would be his last words to her. I heard the third wave coming, destroying everything in its path. I heard ships mooring snap. I ran up the hill, and when I looked back, I realized Pedro, Luis, and Juan were gone. Chile has declared 3 days of national mourning. Townsfolk have hoisted flags in the debris where their homes once stood. And in the square they take communion and remember men like Pedro, Luis, and Juan, fallen heroes who sacrificed themselves so others could live.
Well, definitely a very powerful, powerful story there. Well, that's it for tonight's edition of Currents. Now, coming up tomorrow, we'll take you to a gathering of education experts who are looking at new ways to teach and new ways to learn. We'll have that and more coming up tomorrow. But in the meantime, remember, we're always online at currentsny.net. It means you don't even need a TV to catch us. You can also follow us on Twitter as well and become our fan on Facebook. That's at Facebook. You just go there and search for Currents. But until next time, I'm Matt McClure. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great night.